Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are after market close on Tuesday, September 28th. We're going to take our daily look at SoFi. So SoFi coming down a bit again today. Obviously, the entire market was down. If you want to take a look at that, I'm sure you're aware. Even the Nasdaq and the S&P quite down for an index to be down over 2% is quite impactful. And so, if this was February or March, and SoFi was in its current state, we might be saying, thank goodness that it's only down 3.73%, because in those days when the Nasdaq was coming down 1% or 2 or 2.5%, growth was dropping like 10, 12%, 8% in a day. So we're sort of glad that it's not repeating that particular pattern, but obviously still a bit of an annoyance with these drawdowns lately. But a couple of points that I am finding as potential good news. We'll have to see how it plays out, of course. But this is the daily, and let me just sort of point out what we're looking at here and make this make sense a little bit. So obviously we had this big sell-off, but we dropped 7 cents below the 1687 support zone that we had plotted, and then it's bouncing off there again in the after hours. We'll see how it does. Not that I take that much stock in what goes on in the after hours, but I didn't do this earlier. But let's just see when it hit 1680. The ATR was 3 cents, so that brings it, that support zone is 1684 anyway, and then 1680. So this is just to say, I still think that these supply and demand zones, support and resistance zones, continue to act really, really well on the daily as well as intraday. For support zones, we saw the same thing happen yesterday, where it bounced off at 1685, so 2 pennies away, and then was able to establish over 1753. So today, because the market was certainly being a bit harsher, we weren't able to see that. Now, a couple of things about that does bring into account like a factor of a recent double bottom here. Now, I don't love that it's a slightly lower bottom here, but if we think of all bottoms or all of these support and resistance zones as ranges, not as it says 1687, so it's exactly 1687. That's not how any of these things are meant to be. These are zones, and they are, if you want to try to be somewhat objective with it, you can say these are zones within about an ATR distance. Or sometimes we could draw them as boxes. It just makes the chart then even more cluttered if we put them as even small boxes or small rectangles versus just a line. But anyway, this is just to say you should be able to tell when something hits a zone like this if it's quickly recovering or if it's flipping that from support to resistance. This clearly is not flipping this from support to resistance, right? It's support and then it dips below, but it doesn't ever start treating it as resistance. That's, to me, what the most important thing is. That's how I consider something a zone. And then for trading stop losses in a zone, that's when I use the ATR, which we can talk about another time. You can just look up on other videos. But anyway, this is just to say, between yesterday and today, now we have these double bottoms right around this 1687 level. So the degree to which the buying pressure can continue to come in, I think that this gives SoFi a good chance. I do, of course, as I always do, worry that the buyers dry up at some point and they can't continue to buy in at that level and continue to show up, and that's when we could potentially see it flipping from support to resistance. Now, obviously, that's not the case yet, but something to keep an eye on. And even if it does flip from support to resistance, and we'll look at this on the daily in a minute, I would really be looking to see what it does at the next level down if it needs it. And also, you see this sort of flagging pattern coming in as well, where we have this bottoming out here, and then we have all of these lower highs. So this could be pointing to some bearish pressure in that sort of a setup. But in today's setup, let me talk about what could have been some bullish pressure. And I know I'm handing you a mixed bag, but this is partly a symptom of looking at something every single day and trying to dissect what happens. You end up with a mixed bag a lot of times. And this is just to relay some ideas, some things to look at, some things to consider and make your own decisions. We're not trying to just do the work for you, just trying to relay some thoughts and ideas. Okay, so we bounced off that zone and then we made a run today. So we see this, look at this blue downtrend here and this blue uptrend here. At that point, we're looking at this flagging out for an intraday play since it was approaching the VWAP anyway. It made that run through the VWAP and then started flat topping, which looked like it could be a really good setup. This green was then support that would have been previous resistance on this topping out and this topping out. It wasn't able to hold that for very long and then flipped back, but then it kept trying to reclaim the VWAP and was even fighting to sort of maintain over this previous uptrend level. And at that point, it was looking really strong to me. And actually, it did look relatively strong into close. I know that it was just fighting the fight of the overall market being under the pressure of macro forces, generally FUD and selling pressure that were just plaguing the entire market. But I think on any other day that this sort of setup, and especially this setup here, goes in the other direction, and it goes in SoFi Bulls direction. So being that it finished and it stuck itself so closely to the VWAP, I do think that it's at least giving itself a fighting chance. And like I said, continuing to refuse to flip that 1687 from support to resistance is a really important factor, obviously. And the other thing to look at, to just consider here, is just like we said, that I worry if we continue to go to the well of 1687, meaning we continue to test support at 1687, I worry that at some point the buyers dry up. Similarly, you do see, as a daily factor here, you do see this double topping out rate. Well, the second one was toward the end of the day, right? That's at 313. And then this one came in at just before 11 or about 11 a.m. And so here, then the question becomes, okay, so does the selling pressure continue to be at this range around 17 and a quarter or so? Or is the selling pressure there exhausted? And so now I think it sort of becomes a little bit of a battle between who's going to dry up first. Are the buyers at 1687 going to dry up first, or are the sellers at about 1725 going to dry up first? And if so, I think it allows SoFi to kind of move strongly in either one of those directions. Obviously, if the sellers dry up, then we have the potential for a breakout bull run. It doesn't necessarily have to be a breakout bull run, but at least establishing above that level. Or if the buyers dry up here at 1687, then we may be coming down to test the next level of support, which we can flip over to look at now on the daily. So on the daily, here's what we've been looking at. And to me, this is still intact for a couple of reasons. One, our uptrend support here is still holding. It's not as great as just like a bunch of, or I guess it's not as great as a parabolic move up, right? But this is generally still holding, in my opinion. Now, if we come down and we lose 1687 support, that will obviously put us back underneath this uptrend line. That doesn't necessarily mean to me that this upswing is bust. It does mean that putting SoFi sort of in the category of a runaway momentum play is bust. So I would flip my view on SoFi from momentum runaway potential, which I do still think it has as long as it's over this green uptrend line, to just sort of uptrend potential. This is a trend reversal potential. If it can't hold that 1629, then I think we've probably lost it. Well, we've definitely lost the uptrend potential, and then we run the risk of coming down to fill this gap that was left, this up gap here. That could bring us down to about 1525 or so, just to fill the gap, not to mention any sort of like pressure that would put on the stock overall, because that would be a pretty big downturn. But there are levels to go through before we get there. Additionally, we would have MAs coming into play, and this 20 just crossed over the 50 in a bullish movement. And as we see, the 200 is now just starting to come into play on the daily, and the 200 is right there. Like, this is the striking range. Now, I don't think that SoFi is bouncing off of this because it's the 200. I think, again, in a more sort of flat market, or a market where the macro forces aren't influencing so many stocks so profoundly, I do think it probably fights with the 200 there. I think it just happens to be the case. But we'll see if this bullish crossover 20 over the 50 adds any additional strength to it. I do mostly think the macro forces need to solve themselves first, and then SoFi can start to act more independently and be just less purely tied to the market. And we'll see what that does. Unfortunately, this 20, because this ran up so quickly, is going to be under the 1629 for a bit of time here, and so wouldn't be able to add to support there for at least a few more days, maybe into next week. And additionally, it's the slightly good thing here is it does maybe put up some supportive fight, add some support prior to SoFi coming all the way down to try to fill this gap. But I really think if we lose 1629, I would kind of be surprised if the MAs are able to hold it, and that it wouldn't just come down and fill this gap to about 1530, 1525, whatever that exact high on this day was, 1528. Okay. So, we'll have to see what happens. We do see the volume today was, this is probably still going to be rolling in, so this won't be a final figure, but 25.4 million almost. Oh, Daniel, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Just this afternoon started to come on, so we'll see if I get sickly or not. But anyway, that is mostly less volume than we've seen on these big uptick days. So I'm glad that it wasn't a big, huge drawdown like something like this day, which actually wasn't red. I hate it when Webull does this. Oh no, this day. Okay, sorry. This is me being a little dingy because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. But 55 million on a down day there is obviously quite a far stretch from 25 million. So that's what I'm talking about, just that the volume, it's nice to see it not sort of like spiking really dramatically in advance of this. So those are the things that I'll be looking for in the coming days on the outflow. Actually, a little bit to the upside here. So this could be some larger institutions or whomever coming in to buy this as a potential dip. Obviously, there was also a bit of large outflow, so it's certainly not all of them. It's just sort of a tiny fraction that more that were coming in versus headed out the door. So, we'll just have to see. Like I said, at this point, I'm considering this as first the NASDAQ and the S&P and so on. They need to solve their situation first. And then once in the small caps, and once those are settled, then these stocks can start to act more independently. This was me checking Camber. What was it? Cambridge? I don't even know. Whatever, CEI. But anyway, SoFi. Wow, I'm in worse shape than I thought I was. But anyway, SoFi 7.87% of short interest free float, and coming down a little bit today. So it is good to see that the shorts are seemingly not coming in on such a red day. We may have a factor where some of them or a bunch of them sort of packed up their bags and headed out the door and took some profits, essentially. So if that's the case, then that could be some good news, and maybe gives it some breathing room, if not tomorrow, whenever this sort of selling pressure subsides and lets out. All right, I think that is basically it for today. I certainly appreciate you watching. And feel free to leave your comments below. I know I've been very slow on them. It's just it's been very constrained for time lately. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how to fit everything in, and continue to continue to try to do that. All right, folks. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.